Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real-world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI-powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. My guest today is pretty well known in the industry. He's got over 25 years of experience. During that time, he's worked for many large organizations. Also currently sits on multiple advisory boards and is an adjunct professor of cybersecurity at Washington University in St. Louis. Currently a chief security officer, Andrew Wilder. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Really excited for this conversation, sir. So, in your professional opinion, what's the biggest data security challenge organizations are facing?
I'm gonna start by telling a little bit of my history with data security and how that's a challenge. So, I part of my career was at Nestle, the food giant. I was there for 18 years, and one of the things that we desperately tried to do there was to do DLP in a way that end users could flag their own data for levels of sensitivity. And in doing that, we found that adoption of those kind of things is very, very low, right? You get the IT organization, right? You maybe get like 1% of the overall org that says, oh yeah, I'll do this. I understand that, and I'll flag, if I've got a PowerPoint deck or something that's got sensitive information in it, I'll flag it. But your regular everyday end user could care absolutely less about that. And the other thing we found was that when you put controls in place around those type of sensitive documents, like you can't take a screenshot. Well, guess what? I've got this thing in my hand and I can take pictures of anything I want to. I can record anything I want to all the time. So it was a very interesting and very challenging thing. And what I learned from that was what we need is a tool that uses something not unlike AI to be able to help us crawl all of our data and catalog all of our data and decide on its own, and maybe not with 100% accuracy, maybe 95 or 98% or something like that, but with some level of accuracy where we're seeing the sensitive data, where we're seeing duplicates of sensitive data that we don't need to be paying for, that has more exposure for us. So we understand where our sensitive data is and how to protect it. The second journey that I had with data security was running an antiquated DLP program at Hillenbrand. And in fact, at some part of the program, we had engineering raise something to leadership that said, we're losing $4 million a year of productivity due to issues on our machines because of the DLP agent that's running and slowing things down. Now,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, we weren't ever able to validate those numbers, but nevertheless, that information was out there in the ether and people had heard that and they said, man, what are we doing with this horrible DLP program? I was able to claw back some funds from that company and things like that, but this is running a DLP program where you don't know where all your sensitive data is. You're asking your businesses to tell you where it is or where they think it is. You're trying to run some kind of character recognition software that will look in, picture files and CAD files and things like that and identify IP. And in fact, the reason that company did a DLP program to begin with is because they went to a industry conference and they found a former employee who had created a business that was directly competing with them, and they knew their IP had been stolen. And so they said, how are we going to fix this? We'll create a DLP program. And what that type of DLP program is, again, when you're using manual stuff and relying on human beings to do this for, terabytes and terabytes of data, is it's all about false positives. All false positives all day long. And you've got a team of people that you're throwing at that, running and chasing down all those false positives and tuning all the time. A huge waste of time, huge waste of resources, and a huge negative view that the business has in terms of what cybersecurity is and what it's doing. Now that's the negative side of my journey. Let's talk a little bit about the positives. One of the most effective tools we had in that same scenario is for certain types of data movement, we had a pop-up. Now, I don't know how old you are, but do you remember Microsoft Word in like 1995 when you'd start typing a letter and you get this little guy named Clippy that would pop up and he'd say, "Hey, I see you're typing a letter. Let me see how I can help you." Remember that?
I love Clippy. Yes.
Who doesn't love Clippy? So, not unlike Clippy, the DLP tool would pop up and say, "Hey there, I see you're moving, 1 gigabyte of company data to a USB drive. Can you just tell us why you're doing? Just enter here a business justification." And that became a very interesting exercise in terms of changing users' behavior. People would say, "Hey, they know what we're doing. Maybe we shouldn't do anything bad." Or you get real business justifications, or those false positives would turn into things that were real positives. So that was a positive thing. And the other thing that I've done in the last 2 companies that I've been at is I've explored what's called a DSPM, or a data security posture management tool. Now, this is really using AI to crawl all of your data and the metadata of your files and identify, here's all your sensitive data, here's where it is, here's how you can protect it, here's the people who have access to it, here's where it's externally accessible, here's the different types of data that you're looking at. And that has helped me to answer the question, where is my data and how do I protect what's out there? And if you think about frameworks, my favorite framework is CIS 18. I don't know what yours is, but that's mine only because I've known it the longest. I've done ISO and NIST and some other ones as well. But if you think about CIS 18 framework, which is in order of importance in an organization, number 1 is hardware asset management. Number 2 is software asset management. And number 3 is data security. So knowing what's out there is what's really going to help you to make those risk-based decisions to protect what's needed. So that's my very long answer to your very short question.
Oh man. I mean, let's go back to your journey because I was getting shivers, getting goosebumps as I heard some of the bad experiences because I've personally been doing data security for 2 decades in the organization, and a lot of the difficulties that you brought up. Now, the dollar amount that the business is coming back and saying, "Hey, we're losing this," like that's eye opening. I've never had a business unit come back to me and say, "Hey, you're causing loss of productivity and loss of money," but it makes sense, right? Traditional DLP programs have never really lived up. In fact, I did a talk at a conference last week. It was literally called DLP Didn't Live Up. And that was one of the reasons, right? Relying on antiquated rules and users and just craziness, right? We never got there. But I think the biggest piece that I related to in your story was needing to go back to users and them actually buying in to say, "Yeah, we're gonna help you, right? We're gonna help you classify, we're gonna help you understand." And I think you and I probably agree that's important, but if you're gonna rely on that, you're probably sunk.
You gotta give people the ability to do that. You need to empower people who want to do that and need to do that. You need to let them do that. But, if you're relying on human beings to catalog your data, you're sunk, man. I mean, I don't care if your company even has 1,000 people. We're talking about Nestle that has 300,000 employees, but even if you had only 1,000 people and you said, "Okay, everybody go catalog your data," good luck. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. That sounds like a security problem, right? I know that's a common refrain I've gotten when I've had those conversations. It's like, well, like, yeah, I'm part of security, but it's really a business problem. Let's figure out how to solve it together. Um, Craziness, absolute craziness. But moving along though, things have worked well. You mentioned something that I feel has kind of gone away. And that was the just-in-time pop-up. I used to love that as well. Used the heck out of that because I would always start with, especially with DLP, DLM, right? Data loss monitoring, right? I'm gonna watch what's going on, and then I would use the, I call it just in time. I think a lot of vendors call it, usage justification, right? Or notify and justify, stuff like that. So for you, when you were doing that, it sounds like you got a lot of good intel from kind of that just in time. How did you use it? Right? It sounds like it was eye opening. You probably got a lot of good usages. Where did you go from there?
Well, so I'll tell you what we didn't do. So, the part of the false positives that we were getting every day is a lot less interesting to follow up on than reading through the business justifications and then doing direct follow-up either with the person or with their leadership to say, hey, here's what Sally was doing. Is this expected? Is this what's happening? So it's really, and we at the time did not really have AI tools or good AI tools. I can imagine using AI to go through those just-in-time pop-up usage justifications and then flagging them and say, hey, these ones look legitimate, these are good. And actually by looking at the data they were moving, I would say this is in line with that. But here's the 5% or so that we need to follow up on. It's really about, and you see this with kind of email security too, like getting to that delta of I'm 100% sure this is bad. I'm 100% sure this is good. Here's the stuff that's in the middle. Here's where I need a human being to help me and tune and make it better so I can run the next time. You know, I'm not a psychologist. I don't pretend to understand it very well, but I do know that when you pop up things to people when they're in the middle of doing things and make them think about it, I think most people in the business, besides your malicious insider, I think most people in the business want to do the right thing. So if you're giving that pop-up and you're saying, hey, here's what you should do, here's what you're doing wrong, or here's the right way to do that, I think people will want to help. And I think the more that we can build in those kind of clippies into the things we're doing today, the more we can get good data out of it, and the more we can actually help people to change their culture and their mindset.
Yeah, I know one organization that I worked at. I was really pushing hard to do something similar, kind of the just in time, and it was kind of crazy. I got pushback for it from leadership. We don't want to impact the user. We don't want them to see anything. And I was just sitting there thinking exactly the opposite thing that's going to happen. It's like I hear you. You don't want to do that, but now think of the manpower. Because again, this is before AI enabled tooling. Think of the manpower it's going to take to follow up, follow up quickly, which is really a couple days later to say, "Hey, remember last Monday at noon you were doing this thing? What were you doing?" Like you're never going to get good buy-in, or you're going to get folks that are defensive saying, "I didn't do anything. Wasn't me. Must have been so and so that was using my computer." It's just kind of that mentality of we don't want to impact the workforce. We don't want to freak them out versus, hey, this is actually enabling. This is training. This is getting them to think, to your point. And oh, by the way, we're getting real time feedback as they're doing it. And I think based on what I heard you say, like that was the power, right? You were getting real time feedback. People were thinking and you were getting that intel.
And the best scenario is that they're then telling their peers and their friends at work about it. Like, hey, I was moving files onto this drive and, the IT department popped up this thing to ask me why I was doing it. So if you're going to do that, don't do that. Or I'm trying to move all my files to Dropbox because I'm going to leave next week and they stopped it or they caught it or whatever. Like, letting people know that this is happening, I think is positive. I think we should be doing that.
I completely agree. Completely agree. All right. So kind of going back to the problem, what I heard you say the biggest problem is, and mind you, I definitely agree, is really knowing what you have. I personally haven't looked at CIS 18 myself. I'm a NIST guy, unfortunately. I feel like a lot of leaders just know NIST, so it's easy to kind of, speak NIST back to them and translate. But I tell you first, I'm going to go look at it because the way you laid it out, saying data security is number 3 on there is, oh my goodness, amazing. Like, yes, thank you. So talk to me a little bit more about that, right? If that's your framework of usage, when you enter an organization, How do you start? Where do you go to start forming all of that information? You said hardware, software, and data security is really the top 3 items on there.
So, when you first join an organization, I think the first 30 days is just kind of learning and seeing what's going on, interviewing people, that kind of stuff, looking at historical data in terms of risk reports, audit reports, those kind of things. And at the end of maybe a 90-day period, I think you have enough intel to be able to do a full self-assessment on whatever framework you like. You could use NIST to do this, but just really kind of a t-shirt size, high, medium, low. How mature are we at each of these things? And, CIS 18 is nice because it's in order of priority, but looking at how good am I doing each of these things going through? And then you can use that to start to build your strategy and your roadmap and your team and your tools and your resources to say, okay, business, here's the first 3 things that we're going to go look at. And once we do that, we'll get to this level of maturity and we'll do another assessment. And by the way, a CISO is going to have a 3-year roadmap, but you better believe that that 3-year roadmap is a changeable and fluid roadmap because the risk landscape is constantly changing. You saw the announcement yesterday from Anthropic about these new tools and stuff. I mean, uh, because everything is changing so quickly, we need to be able to adapt to that. So at least every 90 days, maybe, if things were not moving too fast, you could do it every 6 months, but kind of reframing that and looking at, where am I from a hardware perspective? Where am I from a software perspective? Where am I from a data perspective? Looking at those other 15 controls as well, just saying, how do I fit on each of these things? And really being honest about that too, because you can trick yourself into saying, oh, well, we did this program last year. I'm going to move myself from a medium to a high or whatever. Well, are you really covering everything? What's the scope of your control? All that sort of stuff. So being honest, using your team, to kind of help you and challenge you. And that's what I would do in terms of defining the strategy.
I like it, and you and I both agreed, generally speaking, having business buy-in, important, right? Having those conversations important, but you're not always gonna get all the buy-in, all the answers, all the facts. So when it comes to that, you said, kind of first 90 days, are you bringing in anything, maybe it's people or, consultancies or technology to assist you with that trust but verify, or are you kind of relying on business input to your grading?
Yeah, I think each scenario is unique in terms of bringing things in. It depends what kind of tool stack they have, today. I think part of that first 90 days is figuring out what's the tool stack that we have right now? What are the capabilities of those tools? What is the skill set of the team that we have today in terms of being able to fully leverage those capabilities? How much are we paying for those things? And what's kind of industry best practice or cost level of those things, right? Are we paying through the nose? And I've certainly gone into organizations that were locked into horrible, horrible contracts that, it's just something you got to deal with. But I would be looking at that stuff. And then I would say, hey, do I need a third party to come and assess this for me? Do I need a vendor who I've worked with before to come in and do kind of a pre-assessment, a POC kind of thing, so I can say, hey, here's how bad it is before we start diving into it? I think, yes, I would leverage those things, but it really depends on the situation.
Sure, sure. Get in and see the environment, see what you can do yourself and with your team.
Yep,
I like
exactly.
that. I like that a lot. Okay, so we talked about knowing your data, where it's at. What do you think organizations should do from there? Because data security is vast, right? There's a lot of things that go into it. I think if we're honest with ourselves, just about everything we do in security, just about everything, kind of relates back to data. So, what would be the next step in your opinion from a data security perspective?
So once you understand where your data is and how to secure it, then you're going to actually execute on your security and controls framework to lock things down, to do least privilege or just in time or role-based access to the things that, making sure that people get access to the things they need in a reasonable amount of time, right? So you're not holding the business back, but you're also not giving people more access than they need, which is perfect for an attacker or an AI agent to be able to leverage those things to take more data. And I think the next thing that you want to look at is, for me, an AI based data loss prevention. So you can see, okay, how is data moving throughout my organization? How is data moving in and out of my organization? How is data being used in our AI tools, our AI agents, third-party tools that are using AI? So you can start to get a real handle on not only how your own data is, but then how it's moving inside and outside the very opaque walls of your organization and how you can control it once it's out there. I think that's the kind of next level of maturity in data security.
I like that, and I want to kind of go back to a phrase that you use, and I hear this phrase a lot, and I think it's a tough thing to solve. And you mentioned holding business back, right? Security, I feel like, always gets a bad rap, no matter what organization, because those gosh darn guys are holding us back. We can't innovate, we can't be agile, we can't move quickly. I mean, you've been doing this for a while. You've been in multiple organizations. How do you effectively allow the business to do what they need to do, but do what they need to do securely, and try to be along for the ride?
So I believe security is an enabler. One of the great analogies that a friend of mine uses is you can't have a great Formula One car without excellent brakes, right? I'm not saying that security is stopping you, but it's helping you to slow down in the corners to be able to keep going fast the way that you want to do. Um, a lot of letting the business do what they need to do is about understanding the business's risk appetite, and that's where each business is different, and will have different risk appetites. I see my role as a subject matter expert in cybersecurity, and I'm here to say, here is a risk. Here is how exposed we are to that risk. Here's the different things that we can do to reduce the material impact from that risk. And I will gladly go and implement whatever of those controls or not do anything about it based on your comfort or your appetite for this risk. And some businesses are very risk averse and will say, "Oh, give me the most expensive and the best, platinum solution." And others are very, risk comfortable and will say, "I'm not so worried about that one. Let's deal with something else that's more important." So I'm there to support the business as a partner and enabler, but really to help them to make informed decisions in regards to cybersecurity risk.
In your opinion, this is a conversation I've had with a lot of folks lately. You usually at conferences because everybody's talking about it. So, in your opinion, like, how has that changed or not changed with AI and agentic AI and all those things that are becoming commonplace in just about every organization these days?
So I've been to a couple of conferences in the last few weeks, and I always try and bring back to my team and to my peers and to my leadership kind of key takeaways. And what I've seen in the last few weeks is you have to be diving feet first into this thing. You have to be leveraging it fully if you want to be competitive in the business landscape, because your competitors definitely are doing this. From a cyber perspective, we look at AI three ways, and I'm sure that you know this, but let's just say this for our listeners today. The first way we look at it is, how does the business want to leverage it? And how can we help the business to leverage it in a secure way? So just as we talked about before, how do we know what data is going into AI? How do we know people aren't putting stupid things into it that's being used for learning and all that kind of stuff? So how is the business leveraging AI? The second thing is, how are attackers leveraging AI? If we think about what Anthropic was talking about yesterday and these new models that are out in various hands that can find 26-year-old 0 days, that kind of stuff. How are attackers using it, and how do we defend against that? And the third way, and what's really the newer one for me and what I'm leveraging a lot more now, is how do we leverage AI and AI agents within our teams every day to be able to be more secure and fight against those attacks and protect our organizations. We're doing a design partnership right now with a really innovative startup that is building AI agents to support workflows. And it's really about, every CISO, whether you're the CISO of Walmart or the CISO of a 500 person startup, every one of them has a finite amount of resources. Now, the Walmart guy has a very limited on the word finite, but every one of them has finite resources. So how do you, as a, your job as a CISO is to be kind of a ruthless prioritizer. So how do you best leverage those very finite resources that you have to do the most value added work that they can do? So if you're talking about, legacy account cleanup or, the first level of SOC investigations, GRC filling out forms, third party risk management, all of these like super boring manual tasks that maybe before you had offshored or something like that. Now you're saying, look, I can have 4 agents who are running each of these things and then kind of reporting back to me for decision points or outputs or whatever. So building a team of kind of bot masters who are running, multiple agents who are helping to do all of these things. I think that's the future of cybersecurity and where we're going to be going at some point.
I completely agree, and I've been excited personally. I've had conversations with a few of those companies that you're kind of alluding to, and certainly we've seen them at conferences. I feel like a lot of folks are scared, right? Oh my goodness, like my job's on the line. But let's be real, it could be if you don't level up. I kind of look at it as the opportunity or maybe the push to level up instead of being an L1, go be an L2 or an L3, right? Get those skills and let's let the agents do that menial work, that basic work at that point.
So I look at it as really like a retention plan, right? A way to promote yourself and your team and your employees is, how can you do that next level thing, that more interesting thing? How can you level yourself up to do career growth? All of that stuff can be accomplished by leveraging AI and AI agents.
Absolutely. Certainly I think some of the younger generations coming in might have a leg up here, right? Because they're kind of bored into it almost, right? They're using it on a regular basis. Where I think some of us old guard, we have to we got to put a little more energy into keeping up and sharpening our own skills on the AI front. It's a nice equalizer.
What I will say is, when you and I were trying to find IT jobs in the beginning, they were aplenty, and now trying to find entry level jobs for people who may be AI native, entry level jobs are kind of drying up because people are saying, well, why would I hire an entry level SOC analyst, or why would I hire, a service desk analyst when I could have an AI agent who is doing that? So your talent pool of people in the organization to be able to train and, show leadership skills and move up through the org, those talent pools are kind of drying up. So it's I see both sides, right? Or maybe you're AI native, but you need to be able to join an organization and hit the ground running to say, hey, here's the 10 agents I'm going to build on day one to be able to automate all the stuff that you're asking me to do and help the rest of the team and the organization.
You're right. It is definitely crazy times. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn probably far more than I should be. Any human should be, and I'm seeing a lot of that, right? I'm seeing both sides of the coin, articles and all that are out there. Even just people posting, right, desperately looking for work, and they don't know how to sell themselves anymore in the day and age of AI. Where, to your point, leaders are looking for that, right? They don't want to spend millions of dollars on an army of people, or they could have some super smart people and an army of bots, essentially. It's clear, right? You've been doing this for quite some time, Andrew. You've got over 25 years in the industry. You've got a lot of very impressive logos that you've worked for. What was your journey? How did you start, and how did you get to being a chief security officer?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is apologize to your audience who's seen me go on any podcast before, because I've told this story more than once. My wife says one day she's going to record it, but it's recorded like, at least 10 times on YouTube that she can find. So, have you ever seen this TV show called The Office? With Michael and Dwight and Jim, them?
Oh, yes.
So, one of my first jobs out of school was as a customer service rep for a paper company in San Diego. And because it was a small company, not only did I do customer service, but I did marketing, I did sales, I did inventory, I did accounts payable, accounts receivable. I did the whole thing. And so I understood the business from beginning to end. In fact, when we get really busy, I go out in the warehouse and drive the forklift and pick pallets and load the trucks. So I'm telling you, I knew everything about this business. So one day, the owner of the company comes to me and he says, "Hey, Andrew," he says, "we're going to replace our old mainframe systems with Windows servers and Windows workstations. I'm not going to tell you the OS version number because it will date me a little bit, but you can guess." And so I said, "That sounds great." And he says, "Well, you're the youngest guy, so you get to work on this." I said, "Perfect." So just to your point earlier that I was kind of, more PC native than other people. So the next 2 or 3 months, I work nights and weekends. I do all the data conversion by hand. We go live with this new ERP system, and things are breaking, and I'm fixing them on the fly. And it's the greatest day of my very very young career. And I realize after this, I have this kind of moment of reflection, and I think, you know what? Maybe I should do IT as my career. So I save up some vacation time. I save up some money. I go to this MCSE, this Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer boot camp in Chicago in the wintertime for 2 weeks, and you got to pass 7 exams. And all the guys that are there are like Microsoft consultants, guys who are working for HP or Compaq or whatever. And I'm like, I'm a customer service rep at Dunder Mifflin, San Diego. So 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 I passed the 7 exams, I come home, and I put my resume out all over the country. I get picked up by HP doing a security contract for Bank of America in Atlanta. So I move across the country, and I do this big program, about 40,000 people in the Atlanta metro area for the bank, and we're doing vulnerability assessments, and we're reimaging things and patching and replacing, and really great learning. And, I'm a project manager on this thing, and all the guys that work for me are older than me and way more experienced than me, but for some reason, they let me run this thing and I get tons of experience. And then I get a similar, HP says, "Hey, we got another gig for Nestle. You want to move back across the country?" They're based in LA. So I go, "Okay." So I go back across the country, and then I start working for Nestle, and I love the culture, and it's an amazing company. Doing a very similar program, like 38 sites in North America, every Canadian site, most of the US sites. Then I get a similar gig with DHL and do that for like 6 months. I live in Washington, DC. That one I just did on my own. I lived in a hotel for 6 months. Anyway, at the end of this, I have job offers from all three of these companies. And I thought, which one do I see myself staying at for a long time? I went with Nestle. Love the culture, love the company. Stayed with Nestle for 18 years. Started as the information security manager for one of their largest operating company, which is Nestle USA. And then every 3 or 4 years, I just get more team, more scope, more budget, more responsibility. When I left Nestle in 2021, I was the regional CISO of Americas, Asia, and Europe. I had a team of about 60 people around the world. I didn't sleep very much. Monday mornings and Friday afternoons were my friends. But man, don't talk to me Tuesday through Thursday because those were like 14, 16-hour days. Um, at the end of that, my boss, who was the global CISO at Nestle, he said, "Look, your next job is my job, and I'm not going anywhere." And by the way, he's telling the truth because it's 5 years later, and he's still the global CISO at Nestle. He said, "Let me help you find a CISO role at another company." And I said, "Okay, sounds great. Let's do it." So I went over to Hillenbrand. Hillenbrand is an industrial manufacturing company, about 10,000 people, global organization. Did that for a few years. And then now the last 2 gigs that I've had have been in the veterinary space, which I absolutely love. Back to my roots in pet care, which Nestle is a big pet care company, as you know, too. And vet care or veterinary is it's not regulated. Both of the companies have been privately held or PE backed. So, not a bunch of compliance hoops that you have to jump through, doing real, actual cybersecurity and building teams from the ground up. And man, I just love it. I'm very happy to be here.
Man, that is an amazing, amazing journey. So I got to ask, and I don't know if you've been asked this before. Hopefully, this is a little unique, but actually, you've probably been asked this before. If you can go back in time, let's go back to your Dunder Mifflin days, if you will. If you can give yourself some advice, right, based on what you know now, would you have done anything differently on your journey?
Yes. Now, teaching someone who's, like 22 or whatever to do something differently, I think is pretty hard. Most of us learn through making mistakes. But what I would encourage myself to do back then, and what I still try and do today, is to learn as much as you can, learn continuously. Enjoy your life, enjoy your family, make those memories, have those experiences, but really keep learning and expanding. I think I think I could have done my career a little bit more quickly than I did. Um, if I had kind of been more open to change and moved around and things like that. I'm very happy with the way things worked out. I wouldn't change it. But I think by learning more and doing more, and there's a great saying that one of my mentors gave me one time where he said, "No one is going to care more about your career than you do." So don't wait for HR to give you a leadership development program. Don't wait for your manager to send you to training. You go out there and do that stuff. And if you're doing it on your own dime and your own time, kudos to you, right? If your company's going to help you and pay for it, that's great too. But you need to be out there constantly learning and improving and making yourself a better professional. So I think that's probably the advice I'd give myself. And I don't know if I've been asked that exact question before either. So
Good, a little unique. If you've had to almost record your story at this point, you've been asked it so many times. And I definitely resonate with two pieces that you said there. So one, being comfortable with change. I think that's super key. I know early on in my own career, I wasn't, right? I wanted to do that thing, and no, I didn't want that. That sounds boring. I don't want to do that, and I should have, right? I should have, and I've talked to other folks that should have as well, right? Just take a chance, go do that thing, use it for growth or whatever. But you and I must have had very similar mentors, or maybe the mentor of our mentors was a singular person, because I heard very, very similar feedback where it's right. Like, you are going to be the biggest advocate for yourself, for your career, and do not wait for someone else to be that person for you. If you do get someone else, great, right? Hold on to them and stay with them, but the person that cares the most is going to be you for sure.
absolutely.
So I was looking at your LinkedIn. You probably don't need more followers, Andrew. I think you've got like 15,000 followers on there. So kudos on that one. But if folks do want to follow you and connect, what's the best way to do so? Is that LinkedIn or anything else out there?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's good. I'm on podcasts, as you know, we're on one right now, so you can find me on YouTube or your favorite, podcast, Spotify or whatever. Happy to connect on LinkedIn. I also have a website called cybersecurityintheboardroom.com. I haven't updated it really recently, so I apologize for that if people are looking at it. But my wife asked me one time, she said, when you go talk to people and you say, what you've done, right? You speak at all these conferences and stuff, like, when you tell people about that. And I said, well, they can look on my LinkedIn. And she's like, well, are they going to look at something that you did like 4 years ago? Because that's not easy to find. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. So I hired somebody to build a very simple website for me where I'm supposed to post when I go and do speeches at conferences and stuff and podcasts. But I probably haven't done it in 3 or 4 months. So it's a little bit behind. But
Oh man, very good. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, for talking to us about data security and telling us about your journey.
it's my pleasure.
And big thank you to the audience. Really hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned something. Please tell others in your network to follow and listen. This has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte scale data protection without the fuss, please visit centra.io. Catch you next time.